Right. We're gonna start up with the class topic. Okay. I'll tell you what is class is all about, and then I'll tell you. Okay. Generally, class is a kind of a wrapper. Okay. Or class is also can be known as a template. Class is the kind of home to live. Class is collection of objects and objects were the real world entity. Okay, so these are the different meaning that you usually come across when I say about class. Okay, it's nothing but a wrapper, people. So when I want to eat a chocolate, what I'll do, I'll go and buy a chocolate. What you see at the, what happens when you get a chocolate, they have that covered inside a wrapper, correct? What is a wrapper? Nothing. You are not going to do anything with the wrapper. You're going to tear the wrapper up and you're going to take the chocolates in. So what is important there? The chocolate that is sitting inside the wrapper. Same thing here. So class is a kind of a template. This is to make sure that the object attributes function to live upon. Right? Then if you ask me that why you can keep those attribute, object and functions outside a class, why you need to go for a class precisely? Okay, I'll tell you real time scenario where you can easily understand. If people like Adinath, Navina, whoever it is, if they were standing outside the classroom and if I want to teach something to them, I cannot teach because they were outside the class. And if I want to tell something to the general audience, if you people are scattered in some other place, I cannot convey the message what I supposed to convey. So now, if the same 10 people sit inside a class, it is easy for me to communicate. And when I want to send this message to the other class, I can ask one of you people to go and tell them as well. Or if I want to control the other class, I can easily control it over when people are sitting inside a class. That's what the classroom. What is classroom does? Nothing, people, right? But the table inside a class will be useful. The people who's inside a class will be useful. The bench, the marker, the table is what important. But what is class? Class is to have all these collections, all this collection of object. Object is something that you're going to play with. Marker, you're going to write. Board, used for writing. Table, used for sitting. People, used to interact. So class is a wrapper or a template where it is going to work as a structure, whereas an object that is inside is what going to do the role. That's what I say, object of the real world entity. If I say Tamil Nadu, there is no place called Tamil Nadu. Inside a Tamil Nadu, there is a place called Chennai, there is a place called Vellore, there is a place called Madurai. But there is no Tamil Nadu. Right? What is India? Nothing. India is a template to occupy the states. There is no place called India. Either you can go for HP, MP, UP, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Telangana. What is this? These are the states that was organized under a single umbrella called India. That is what it is. So basically, the class is to create a structure which is further used to create inheritance or kind of extension. If one of the class has the object, then other class can come and ask the object to inherit. They can use the same object. So the data redundancy will be removed. For example, if I have a mechanical shop where I have every tool that is required to repair a bike, and if one of you set up a same mechanic shop, what I can tell, see, you are my student, you are trying to put your shop under my control, so don't buy the tool separately. You can use my own tool. So now I'm extending set of my feature to the other people who is under me. That's what class is going to do. When you declare an object, a variable or a function, and if the same object, variable or a function is used in some other place, what you have to do, you have to declare it separately. But if you declared those things inside a class, and they can easily access it just by doing the inheritance. So yesterday also when I was teaching about the exception, you would have seen that when I want to create a user defined exception, I'll create my class by inheriting the feature of my parent class called exception. That's what it is. Okay. So now let me show you one example. Variable is equal to Dhoni def function. Welcome to appear. Now what is this? These are the two functions and one variable which is actually sitting outside without a structure. You can't do that. You can call that. But when you want to access this some other place, you have to call it again or you have to redefine it again. But if you keep under a single class, then you can reuse it again and again. And also the memory wise, you will be consuming it very less because if it is unstructured and if you want to call it 10 number of times, it will create 10 different memories. So to avoid all these problems, we will go for a class structure. So I'm going to make this as a structure of a class. Okay. Basically, class can be formed using two things. Without a constructor, which is an old school mechanism, and with constructor, which is memory efficient. Okay. Now I'm going to create the old school of class, my class colon, and then I'm going to keep the things inside. Now what happened? The same variable and same function is now inside a class. Real time scenario, people. If Adinath and Naveen is standing outside the class, anybody can come and ask them to go somewhere. But if they were sitting inside a class, what they have to do? They have to get the permission of the class teacher to get these guys or to talk to these guys. The same thing. Now the variable and class is inside this class. So what I have to do? I have to call the class. Look at that. My class dot variable. My class dot function. This is how you need to do. Every time you need to get the access of the class to use this particular variable. This is what we do call it as class without a constructor. This is class name and this is the way you use the class and their corresponding attribute or object inside a class. Okay, this is without a constructor. Fine. Quickly make a note. Quickly.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now this can be further bit optimized like this. I'm sorry. Now what is this? Instead of you calling the class every time, you can just represent it with some bit of a reference. So this is what? Now my is nothing but a reference of the class, my class. So this is what we call it as object reference. This my is now trying to indicate this particular object. I kind of alias name, okay? Alias name, where instead of calling these, you can call these references. So now what is my? My is an object reference to the parent class. Now this is what we call it as without a constructor. The problem with the problem by having the without constructor kind of a class is that it takes a lot of memory. So for example, if you have another class, say def new and print welcome to, well, something like that. Now if you want to call this class again, what will happen is that it will create another memory. It will create another memory. And also, for example, if it takes some argument, say name, country. No, basically what happened is that this function takes one argument and this function takes similar argument to that of the earlier function. Additionally, it has some other argument. Now what happened? Both this function is actually sitting inside the same class. But what you have to do is that you have to pass the data externally. So now look at that. Dhoni, and it might take the same data. So basically Dhoni is needed for both the function, but unfortunately there is no place for us to do it a common initializing where only once you store Dhoni and it can use it. That's not going to happen in this kind of without constructor class. So now what happened? Just to store or just to pass a data like Dhoni or name argument, right? You have to do it separately, externally to the function. So what happened? Time consumption will be higher, no, consumption will be higher, and also unethically you're trying to share the data again and again, even though it is the same data. See, what I meant to say in real time scenario is that if you people are sitting inside my class, and if the management, for example BBA, want to give certain things to you, there is no need for them to send it to people individually, because you are sitting under my class. I'll ask BBA to give everything to me. That means I'll take it in a common place, and I'll ask you people to come and collect it whenever you wish to have. Instead of they come and give it to you people individually, it is waste of time. Instead, as a class teacher, they can tell me that Mohan, please do coordinate the things together and let people come and gather if they need it. That is a better method. So that is what missing here, unconstructed way of defining a class. Okay, now execute this quickly, and then I'll explain you how to convert this into a constructor based class. Just do that and I'll tell you. Good. Now Now watch closely that how I'm converting this into a constructor class, and that is what gonna play a huge role. Okay. So wherever you go, people, make sure that you always start with the class. Two things that needs to be implemented in common in most of the program. One is a class and another one is exception handling. Okay. So suddenly if the client gives you a requirement, don't start writing the requirement based thing. Put it in the class, write an exception, and then write this kind of a code. Okay. Fine. Now, first thing what I'm going to do is that I'm going to make this parenthesis after my class at line number 59. So now my class is called as constructor. Constructor name should be the name of the class followed by empty parenthesis at first. Okay, my is as usual object reference to the class constructor, but here my is called single object instant reference. That means in previous case, during the without constructor case, what might happen is that that particular MY will be just an object reference. So if you use that particular object reference for the 10 different places, it will create 10 different memory, because that is without a constructor. But the beauty here is now with the constructor is that this MY underscore object becomes an instant object reference. Single instant, that means single memory. So if you try to call it 10 different functions, right, it will execute on a same memory. It won't create a separate memory altogether. So that's why we call it a single instance memory, instant object reference. Okay. Whenever you create a constructor, an attribute called init will be created internally. Init in general called as attribute or magic method or de-ender method, because it has double underscore at either end. Here in class, init is other shape or form of constructor. See, init is also again constructor, because it is just created the moment constructor got created in the class internally. We can, or we should use init if we need to initialize any object or any variable inside that class. Okay, so whenever you want to commonly initialize certain variables or attribute, right, that is where you can use init internally. But by default, init will be something that created at the background as soon as you created a constructor. Further, init is not mandatory to be used here, but if that is the case where you have to use init, you can use it. So that can be declared here. Def underscore inid curly As of now, I'm just keeping past because I'm just created. So I'm just putting it here. Okay. So the next point to be remembered is that when we create a constructor, a hidden object will be created automatically. That means at line number 62, you have the class, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what will happen is that when we create a constructor, hidden object will be created automatically at line number 62 at this special pointer. Okay. So now when someone asks you whether this is an empty parameter, tell them no. Whenever you create a constructor, a hidden object will be always created. That is actually used to internal reference. What my underscore object is for the external world is the same thing. The one which is created here is used for internal object reference. So that you need to be very clear of. Now, what is my class? My class is a constructor of your class. So, what is init now? Init is nothing but a representation of this constructor. So, what happened? This argument and this argument should be always in a match. The number of argument, how we use in function, right? Same thing. So, now at line number 62, whenever you create a constructor, there is one hidden object that always gets created. Correct? So, now here init, it won't have any hidden object. You have to declare the hidden object. Basically, you have to match the number of arguments between the constructor and the init because constructor and init are more or less same. Since only on the class it creates one hidden object, you have to create one name for that. So I'm going to keep it as self. So now self is just user defined name used to represent a hidden object that got created in the constructor formation. You know it, right? In function we discussed the number of argument and the calling should match the number of argument and the definition. So now this is the definition of the constructor. This is the calling of the constructor. I told in the constructor will have one hidden object. So just to match the hidden object, you have to keep some name. Some name. I see certain books saying that you have to keep self, not at all. You can keep any name. So Adinath is nothing but a reference of the class object that gets created hidden or hidden. That is actually this Adinath is an object now which can be used for the internal operation. Similar to my object is an external object reference. Adinath is an internal object reference. It is like when I want people to come to my class, I want everybody to come with one identity. Maybe you can put an ID card or you can get some access card. So now Adinath is the access for the internal operation. My underscore object is the access card for the external operation. This is kind of just a representation of a class. One is to pass the data, one is to supply the data. Okay, one is to take the data. So these are the these are the place where you're going to take the data, and here you're going to supply the data back to the place where it was actually located. Okay. Now what you have to do is that what is the problem we discussed earlier? No need to pass object externally. So you no need to pass it via calling. Let me take this one. This is not needed here. So don't pass here. So let me keep the same object. Right. This also will have one hidden object because it is using my underscore object. See, it is using my underscore object reference. Since this my underscore object reference as one hidden object, right? Wherever you use this my object, that function will also have one hidden argument. So this is also having one hidden argument. This is also having one hidden argument. So as usual, you need to match that. So same thing, match that with one name. So this is what we call it as references. So now here one argument, here one argument. Argument matching function will be called. So this is what the first argument that you usually see. Okay. So just to keep like a normal standard, let me keep it as a self. Let me keep it as a self only. So everything is a self because in each of the places, the calling as one data object. So just to match the number of arguments set, I'm just keeping self in all the places. Okay. So now what happened? I want to pass some data here, right? So what is constructor? It is going to construct the data that is needed for his class. So what is the data? First is name. So Dhoni, comma, country, India. Now what happened? I am passing Dhoni only once. In the previous case, what happened? Wherever it is needed, I am passing it twice or thrice or four times, but I am going to pass it only once. So this init is now going to take that argument, comma, name, comma, country. So here three arguments. One is which is hidden, that is matched with the name of self, and Dhoni is in the name, and India is in the country. Now initialize that. Self dot name is equal to name. Self dot country is equal to country. Even you can keep A, B also. No issues. That's it. Now what happened? Name and country is commonly initialized inside a class. So whoever want that, they can use it. Now if it needs only the name, it can take the name. If it needs both name and the country, it can use it. Now you know the benefit of defining a constructor, right? Data can be commonly initialized, data can be easily referred, and my object will carry only one single instead of memory where a lot of function can be easily called upon, and you can pass data only once, and once you initialize it in a common place. Now for example, if I have 15 different function needs this argument, they can easily get it. Even if the other class needs to access this, they also can able to access. This is what the benefit of having the constructor based class. Understood? Adi, Naveen, Shailesh.
Yes, sir.
Good, good.
Yes,
Do
sir.
that, do that, do that. So take your own time here, but I want you people to script this properly. Make sure that you create this as an art. Think of it. Look at line number 62 to 70. All these 7 to 8 points are always something that you can expect in interviews. They'll ask you to give that in a detail. So this is absolute place where you can give them in a detailed note. Okay. Take your time and do it.